All right, I think we're live. What's going on, everyone? This is Jack Allen with another episode, Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. So today, I was just telling Don before it started, I have the one and only Don Jeffries. And before I introduce him, I still want to say Don was the first book I got clean. I started reading conspiracy books again, and Don was the first book you blew my mind about Abe Lincoln, the Civil War. So Don, thanks for being on the show, and thanks for all your hard work.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I'm honored that mine was the first one you read. And the book you're referring to is Crimes and Cover-Ups in American Politics, 1776, 1963. And
Yes.
I'm pushing that hard now because the paperback just got released a couple of days ago, and it has some new content. It has a new chapter, and it
Oh,
has a
no
new
way.
updated forward. So I'm asking everyone who wants to support me to please buy that because I'm working on Hidden History 3 now, and
Oh
I'm
my gosh.
well into it, but after the publisher asked for it, then they're kind of backing off a little bit in this climate and saying, I think they're being pressured because of the conspiracy type books. But at any rate, the last I heard was they may base the decision on whether to take it
Hmm.
on how this paperback does. So if you want to help me buy the
Wow.
paperback so that we can get Hidden History 3 out there easily.
Jeez, Don, that is so you think it's strictly like pressure conspiracy theorists have taken a whole new like negative outlook even compared to JFK. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and my publisher is Skyhorse. My primary publisher is Skyhorse. That's one of them. And they're a division of Simon and Schuster now, so they also have to
Mm.
behave because they get Simon. I mean, I have a Simon and Schuster authors page now, which amazes me every time I look at it. And I'm sure Simon and Schuster, if they look real closely, and say there's no other Simon and Schuster authors with the kind of content I have.
Right.
So hopefully they'll scrutinize it too much.
Uh,
But I think that they've had some hit pieces on Skyworks because they not only publish me, they publish big names like Oliver Stone, Roger Stone, Jesse Ventura.
mhm.
They published Woody Allen's last book. So they're publishing people that are controversial, and they basically did a hit piece I read on Vanity Fair or something where they talked about all these awful conspiracy books they published. So I know they're feeling the heat about that. So and I give them
Uh,
credit for publishing what they publish. So, but they need to see a lot of sales, I think, to keep going down that road.
all right, then I'll definitely push your advertise that book because that's your. I love both of them. I have both of them, but on my Kindle though. Not I have the hard copy of the Abe Link the older one, time wise. But I thought you. So I just read The Devil's Chessboard. Have you ever read that book? It's like
Yes,
called
yes, yes. The David Talbot. Yeah,
yeah. So I thought of you though because he spoke in Kennedy in such great light. Both
yeah.
of them in that book. But I thought of you because I remember you called yourself a Kennedy fanboy when we talked the one time.
I am. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a fan pretty much of it. I mean, Huey Long is my all time favorite hero, and
Right.
the Kennedys. I have a soft spot for the Kennedys, and people accuse me of having a blind spot. And maybe I'm naive about them. I'm sure they weren't perfect,
Yeah.
but geez, enough of them have died unnaturally. That tells me they must have been doing something right because
That's a really good, yeah, that's an absolutely good point. Because I've the one, everyone talks about that silver executive order or whatever. And
yeah,
I used to feel like you, and then Corbett, James Corbett, or I think that's he did something like examining it. And you can only take like everyone has an opinion, but yeah,
yeah.
but you're right though. They've been killed, all of them have been killed for if they're, all bad, that's pretty crazy measures to take.
Oh, and right now RFK Jr. is probably the most courageous spokesman on the American scene right now. If I was trying to build a political movement, I think he'd be the person to rally around. Now, unfortunately, he has a genetic
Hmm.
hereditary disorder that causes him not to be able to speak above much of okay. He's very hoarse.
Yeah.
So that's going to limit him politically, and he's already going to be ridiculed anyhow because of his positions on vaccine. He just wrote a book about Fauci, who I had to look and see if Skyhorse because Skyhorse publishes him too. I don't know
Ah.
if, but he's also had other publishers, so I don't know if Skyhorse published that or not. Probably because it was an
Hmm.
attack on Fauci, but he's if he didn't have that limitation, I think he would be the one we'd be rallying behind because obviously if people can see the answer how they should, and so if you have to have somebody to try to coalesce behind, I think he would be the guy. But so
Yeah, I
again,
saw Roger Stone, I think, right at the I saw it on John Brisson's Twitter that like he said that if Donald Trump doesn't run or something like that, his vote would be for Robert Kennedy Jr.
Oh, that is. I would try. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Roger Stone. Well, Roger Stone. I'm connected to him because
I
he
know you wrote your forward, right?
wrote the forward to Hidden History, which
Yeah.
is still my most successful book. But and to be honest with you, if anybody from Skyhouse is out there listening, I don't know how many books Skyhouse has published that has sold more copies than Hidden History. I know it sold twice as
Wow.
many copies as the Woody Allen book, and
Yeah.
it sold about 10,000 more copies than Roger Stone's last book. So I mean, I saw those statistics in that hit piece on. Of course, they didn't mention my book. So if they're
Right.
looking at sales, not too many books have sold more than Hidden History. So they ought to consider that, I think.
Well, no, you really, I mean, that was, I still like that, finding out that Abe Lincoln was such a tyrant was one of the, like, the most, like, cognitive dissonance. Like, I couldn't, because for everybody brings him up as the greatest president of all time, the great emancipator, whatever they called. And you really, like, I was shocked. I was shocked.
Well, it's an eye opener, and it's I remember I used to love Lincoln too,
Yeah.
and I worship him, and his words still resonate. He was a poet. He had a way with words. He could he could really turn a phrase. No doubt about the better angels of our nature, and all these great words to use with malice towards none and charity towards all that we still remember. But if you look at his actual record, and it took me a long time because I had studied his assassination for a long time as well, and there's no question, that was a coup. I mean, it was an inside job. I of course, but now the same forces, the same court historians that worship him, worship his tyranny and celebrate his tyranny and all unconstitutional things he did, throwing untold thousands of numbers of Northerners in prison. And now we see the precedents he set. The latest one would be, you see what happened to those January 6th protesters.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's a great comparison.
Yeah, I mean they've all but suspended the writ of habeas corpus for them. They're sitting there. Many of them have been denied bail. A lot of people have been hung. I mean, for being in a political protest. So it's really unconscionable. But if you look back, Lincoln set the precedent for so many. As I mentioned in the book, he set the precedent for what Woodrow Wilson did in World War I, throwing protesters against that war in prison. He set the precedent for what FDR did, not only the Japanese Americans, but also the German Americans and Italian Americans, who were not as many, but they didn't get any reparations. No one talks about them.
Right.
And also all the way down to what happened at Guantanamo Bay when George W. Bush's lawyer actually cited Abraham Lincoln as a precedent for the torture of the freedom.
Wow.
Lincoln set a lot of awful precedents, and I think he should be scrutinized. That's why I wrote about him the way I did. It's not, I'd like to feel the same way I did about Lincoln at one time,
Right.
but you can't look at the record and be honest about it.
Well, I think you brought up a great point also with that in the act, John Wilkes Booth, right? He was an actor, and an actor took this role. Why do you think that there's something tied with, like, celebrity, or do you think it's a good cover? Do you have, like, a theory on that?
Well, you can go down the rabbit hole in these things very much, and one of the writers I very much admired is the late Dave McGowan, and a lot of people compared us, and I've read many things where people put us in the same breath. Our writing style's kind of similar. Dave died way before his time of a very suspicious, aggressive cancer about 3-4 years ago. I had just started corresponding with him. I admire his weird scenes inside the canyon. I use it a lot, and he did a fantastic. He was working on. He did the best thing on the Apollo moon flights ever, wagging the moon doggy. If you're sitting on the fence about that, read that. Brilliant stuff.
I've read that. All right, that's on my list now.
Wagging the moon doggy. It's online. He did he did a lot on 9/11. He did great work on the Boston bombing, but he was well into something he was writing about the Lincoln assassination, and I got the impression. Of course, he died before he could complete it. I got the impression he was basically calling it a Sandy Hook type thing. I think he was basically saying it didn't happen. I don't know where he was, but he talked about the theatrical aspect to it, and he analyzed, for instance, the photos, very professional, and they're basically the kind of shots that actors give of the four the leading so-called conspirators, especially Lewis Payne, who was a good-looking young guy, one of the guys that they hung. And he said, why did and they don't look like any mugshots you've ever seen before. So again, if you could look at his website, I think it's still the Center for an Informed America, CIA, and his work should still be there. But I don't know where. But he talked about a lot of this stuff, and a lot of the Lincoln assassination narrative doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There are holes in it, and just for on the surface, for one thing, and as I write about in Crimes and Cover-Ups,
Right.
it was a Southern conspiracy. All of the individuals in the alleged conspiracy were from the North, except for Lewis Payne, who was probably a spy for the South, but all the others were Northerners. I mean, John Wilkes Booth came from a big time East Coast,
Right.
the Barrymore, a huge acting family. So a very strange kind of group, be some sort of like a Confederate conspiracy. But anyway,
Yeah.
there's
a Masonic pose. I'm gonna have to go through this.
They all have that. They've all got the hand in their jacket, every one of them.
Interesting. That is crazy. No, but that was such a good connection when I read your book. So I think this almost ties in pretty well with your one post about because it kind of ties in with weird scenes, how celebrities die younger, like these crazy lives, and I don't think they have as much power as maybe they used to. But I can pull up your article for, I think you did it in June.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody's in showbiz.
Oh yes,
yeah. But yeah, I just think that you bring like it's a crazy the power they have over us, and how that would never be left up to the chance who you would get into stardom. I mean, it's just and like weird scenes inside the canon. All these people had such crazy connections. Wasn't it who's Jim Morrison had all of his music written, didn't even know how to read music.
Jim Morrison's father was Admiral Morrison, who was in charge of the Gulf of Tonkin fleet during one of the biggest false flags ever. So that's kind of crazy. But I just got my newest book, and it's coming out any day officially, and it's about showbiz. It's called On Borrowed Fame: Money, Mysteries, and Corruption in the Entertainment World. I read a lot about this. I was influenced a lot by Dave McGowan on it, but I go into a lot of the what you're talking about. Everybody's in showbiz was kind of a tip of the hat, like kind of to whet people's appetite for that, because politics and show business have a lot in common. And one thing I found is that show business is the only competitor for politics in terms of these unnatural deaths. People in Hollywood and the music business. I mean, you'll find things like Graham Nash of Crosby, Stills, Nash. I loved his music.
Right.
He had a girlfriend, an ex-girlfriend, that was found dead in some bushes and had been stabbed like 50 times. I mean,
yes,
that doesn't happen outside politics or show business. I mean, if I had an ex-girlfriend that I would probably be looked at this, but it just doesn't happen. And I don't know what it is about that, but I examined, going back to the early days of Hollywood, some of the really bizarre deaths. Some of the bizarre exits where people will be kind of having a good, solid career. They're forgotten now. I mean, I'm one of the few people that remember these people, but and you wonder what happened to him. And I found one guy that was a leading man, early talkies. He was so obscure. I mean, he must have died like 120 by now, but there's no record of his death. This is a Hollywood movie star. How does that possibly happen? Yeah, but there's a lot of that out there, lots of questions. The fact that so few, and I mean few, of the women, especially in Hollywood, had biological children. I mean, it's almost like there was something in the air out there. I mean,
how many? Like, how many are we talking?
Oh, the vast majority. Let's put it that way. I mean, especially in the early years of Hollywood, and I don't think it was always because they didn't want to. I mean, I have you'll have records of women, actresses being married for 30, 40, 50 years.
Right.
Same guy, no children. So I don't know what that means. I mean, certainly it happens sometimes, but it's one of those curiosities I talk about. In the book, it also it goes a lot. It combines kind of my Survival of the Richest book on economics, where it examines the disparity of wealth out there. And that was the original impetus for the book. I started contacting these old celebrities that had been on TV shows back when I was a kid, or had been in bands, and a lot of them, got back to me, and they all told the same story, pretty much. I mean, virtually every one, what royalties, what they all were ripped off, and so I was intrigued by that, and so I started looking. And the book is full of figures of net worth, what people died with, and you'll see. Why did Stephen Fetchit, who is a kind of a caricature of racism,
Yeah.
he died with a $10 million net worth. Eddie Davis died with less than $1 million. How do we explain that?
Wow.
That's the kind of stuff that fascinates me, and so that's included in there, along with all of the big scandals. Like I go into Marilyn Monroe's death, John Belushi's, Natalie Wood, Elvis Presley.
All right,
The
Don, you
biggest one.
sold me. I'm gonna get it.
Well, hopefully it'll be out there any day I'll be promoting the hell out of it when it does. They're still I don't know when they're going to put it out, but it should be out there any day. But it's a little bit of a departure for me, but I think it's
Well, it ties in this
yeah,
world. Yeah. I also find it like, so maybe you've, with your research of it. So I remember reading, I don't know what, but it said like, because I was wondering, like, did the occult and stuff join, like, was that in that area before Hollywood started, or was it a symptom of it? And I remember, like, so Hollywood, they were filming out there because Thomas Edison controlled the patent on how to make movies. So that was as far away as they could get. You had all that land. And I was looking like, when did it start getting weird? And I guess it started right away, right? Because you had who was Charlie Chaplin? I don't know if he was filming in Hollywood, but he was a pedophile, right? He was.
Well, he liked. I mean, I don't. And of course, I write a lot about child sex scandals, but
Yeah.
really, people I think misuse the pedophile label. Like, because pedophile technically is someone who's attracted to a prepubescent girl, and most of these guys, like Charlie Chaplin, like teenage girls, but technically. And a lot of Errol Flynn did too. And but of course in Hollywood, and if you look at the music business especially, rock and roll stars, I mean, these guys, rock stars at their peak and underage girls went together.
Right.
Like wine and cheese. I mean, it was everywhere. I mean, this was just, I remember when Jodie Foster was 15 years old, Mick Jagger, who I think was 40-ish time, they just announced in People magazine that he was going to be vacationing. Jodie Foster was going to be accompanying Mick Jagger to Paris for the summer.
Jeez.
If you're a 40-year-old, office worker, and you get first of all, their parents are going to lock you up for even asking their 15-year-old daughter to go to Paris. But it happens all the time. Don Henley of the Eagles, very famous case, was caught with 2 underage girls naked in his mansion. Nothing happened to him, and the girls were actually busted. Some kind of prostitution or something. So it happens all the time, and so it's they play by different rules out there. There's no question about it, and they're above the law for the most part. So this book is about all of it. I mean, it's got all that stuff, and the disparity of wealth. And
do you have the theory like that? What was it, the chicken or the egg? Like, did this occult seep into Hollywood because it was a great way to like push a hidden agenda, or is it like you need to practice this to get into Hollywood?
Well, I think that because of what Hollywood is, it's kind of from the very beginning, back in the silent era, the 1920s, the Roaring '20s. Now, in America at large, premarital sex was still very rare. And if it happened and the girl got pregnant, you pretty much always got married,
right?
Or shotgun wedding type of thing. In Hollywood, you were having promiscuous sex everywhere. And so they were already living in kind of a different area. And so clearly there weren't, one thing you look up, you don't find that there were too many churches at the peak of Hollywood. I don't think too many of those stars were going to church every Sunday. So there's a vacuum there. So something like Satanism can certainly fill that void. Somebody like Aleister Crowley, who was the biggest Satanist of them all back there, he was, he had connections and admirers, through people like Paul McCartney. There are lots of, people in the music business, especially Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin. He worshiped the guy and, kind of tailored his lyrics that way. And there's a connection there to crimes and cover-ups because Aleister Crowley's, his philosophy was do what thou will. That was he used, do whatever it is. And of course, later the hippies would kind of paraphrase it to say, what if it feels good, do it. And that's basically what his was. But that goes back to Benjamin Franklin and the Hellfires Club, which was the first real blasphemous offshoot of the Freemasons, who were a bunch of wealthy one percenters that were gathering together for orgies. underground, an old abandoned Benedictine monk.
Right.
And they had prostitutes dressed as nuns, which right there that tells you they were blasphemous, because why would you
Yes.
do it as nuns? So their philosophy, they're the first ones. Their credo was do what that will.
Oh, I didn't
And
know that.
I wrote about that in Crimes and Cover-Ups, and I don't think it's generally known. So interesting that Aleister Crowley picked that up. So you had these people, I mean, there were lots of good people out there. Jimmy Stewart, one of my favorite actors. There were lots. There weren't all, but there were, because of the lifestyle. And you had people, the Elizabeth Taylors of the world getting married 8 times. Mickey Rooney 8 times. Mickey Rooney 8 times and died with left an estate of $18,000 after like a
Jeez.
70-year career in show business.
Right.
So the book is full of all that kind of stuff. I don't want to promote it too much because it's not even
Oh
out there
yeah,
yet.
yeah. But no, I think that was a great little segue and a teaser for that book. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was the gender war, and I loved what you wrote about in that. So everyone, go to Don. So I'll post all that stuff, but donaldjeffries.wordpress.com. But I'll put
Well,
the link.
actually, it's easier now. You can go to my friend Tony Arterburn made a show. If you want to get my blog, keep it in, you can go to donaldjeffries.news. And I also write regularly. I write regularly on Substack. You can go to donaldjeffries.media.
Oh, that's great. Man, you're taking it. That's awesome, Don. But I love that what you were writing there about the general, like, so how I'll let you explain it, but the beginning, like, you slowly put an idea and you make it acceptable through television. So you can explain, if you could explain kind of what you were writing in that post.
Well, in the culture and the political world as well, we've all heard the boiling frog analogy,
Right.
and basically that is basically gradualism. And I've written and talked about gradualism for a very long time, and I'll give you one example where you can see gradualism play. That would be one of my early favorite shows was The Simpsons. I loved The Simpsons for the first 7, 8 years, and then I don't know now it's like 20 some years of crap. It's just horrible.
Right.
It was great at the beginning, and as soon as they started relaxing, and of course I'm against censorship, but as soon as early on they would say, like Bart would say butt all the time.
Yeah.
Characters would say butt because you couldn't say ass.
Okay.
As soon as they could say ass, that's all they said. And then they had an episode of Marge farting, and and so it was downhill from there. And if you watch the DVDs, my son was a huge fan of it. So when he was little, we used to get the DVDs, the commentaries and stuff. And the writers will tell you, yeah, we wanted to do this all along. So lucky, I guess they had some censorship. We wouldn't have 7, 8 great seasons of The Simpsons. But that's one example. As soon as they can do it, they will. And but it's slowly and gradually. First, you start saying butt, then you say ass.
Right.
Eventually, you drop the F word. Then you have just increased potty humor. Another thing is is just even something as simple as showing blood. If you watch the classic old horror movies or the classic Alfred Hitchcock suspense film, you won't see any blood, none. Yet they're much more effective. And no, it's not necessary. It's what people imagine it, so it makes it better because people use their imagination. As soon as they could start using blood, you had the Hammer films in the 60s and 70s, and of course there's real slasher films, Friday the 13th and all those. Once they started, it was kind of an orgy of blood. It desensitizes people. That's gradualism, where you do that and you can you can make people think differently, and that's what they did. Or even something as simple as it's unthinkable even 40, 50 years ago to have showing somebody throw up on screen. Now I don't see too many movies where they don't have at least one vomiting scene. It's now a trope. They love, and characters will throw up over nothing. It's just so they can show them doing it. And and I remember when I was watching the Rugrats when I was with my kids and they're little, they showed the characters throw up a couple times, and I was so mad.
Yeah.
And, why are they doing that? You don't need it. It's stupid.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing. That's gradualism, where it gradually desensitizes people. People become aware of it. And now you have the kind of the mess that you have out there now, where most of it's unwatchable because it's just everything is an attempt to get some kind of an absurd reaction to something sexual or something gross, some type of potty humor, and there's no thought given to it at all. And that's so I hated censorship, but I recognize now. I guess it held these guys in check for a while.
Yeah, well, I almost sometimes I agree with the like satanic panic moms of the. I was too young. That was like the '80s, right? '80s and '90s. Yeah, I mean, I almost see, they probably. I don't know where the happy medium is. It doesn't. I don't know if there is a line with the happy medium.
Yeah, because you have, again, some of it I think is relatively innocent. Like when I was a very young teenager, I went through a brief period where I loved Alice Cooper.
Okay.
And they were like the first band really to dress up. But they were really a good band. They were just very talented, but they would have these provocative, like Dead Babies, Halo of Flies, but it appealed to young teenagers that were, oh, that's cool. That sounds cool. But again, I was always already, and then you had Black Sabbath and things like that, where they were trying to get that out of teenagers. And you can go back to the 50s, the James Deans and things like that. Those were when they started promoting the bad boy and the rebel. Girls, why do you want the nice guy next door? You want the guy over there in the motorcycle jacket that's brooding and probably going to treat you bad. This is the message that happens over and over, but it's a gradual message. And people don't seem to realize it. I point out, well, they didn't look at this from 20 years ago. It's a completely different message. But now, of course, the message is so poisonous. I don't know how anybody watches it. I usually I try to watch modern movies, and I usually just turn them off. The propaganda is so insidious.
So one, I mean, just see Cardi B's most popular song that's on YouTube, but so is it purely greed? Is there a more sinister reason why this clearly we're being programmed to accept like degeneracy in my mind, but
right.
What do you think is it greed? Is it just to get more people? What's behind that?
Well, certainly there's a greed element of greed, but I think that, one of the oldest legends is in the world, in literature certainly, is the Faustian legend, selling your soul to the devil. Mm-hmm. And this has been used in media forever. And I think, I don't know if some of these successful people literally sell their soul to the devil, but some of them have alluded to it. Yeah. And I don't know if there's, a procedure where they actually sign a paper or whatever, but I think there's something to that, because if you look at, sure, I mean, some of them could just be, they're on drugs, they're young, they're stupid. So again, they're like I was at a younger age with Alice Cooper, where I'm just, that's cool, they're listening, maybe, but and certainly you have to, the crowd out there, there's not a bunch of, Christians out there counter them in Hollywood or in the entertainment world, certainly the music industry, or even politics, real Christians. But so I think that what they do is they look at, okay, what can this can bring me success, and maybe they don't believe in God. I don't know what they think it is. But I don't think it's accident. If you look online and you see all those hook 'em horn, all the people that do the hook 'em horn thing, the Devils, which is, are they all really University of Texas football fans? Queen Elizabeth is really. I mean, so, and then you had the Black Eye Club, which is even more mysterious.
Yes. Yeah.
Of course, that's apparently tied into the child sex scandals, adrenochrome, what's doing it. But however you look at it, and of course, the things with the eye, the circle over the eye, the Greta Thunberg. I mean, is Greta Thunberg really? Right. Why? I mean, came out of nowhere. So why is she doing that same, covering one eye thing that these are all just like you saw John Wilkes Booth and people like that with the hand inside the coat. These people are all about symbols. And so now they don't do because Freemasonry's kind of, I guess, passe for the most part, but you don't see him doing that, but you see him doing weird stuff. I mean, I've never known anybody that does, the 666 thing with their fingers,
right?
Circle over their eye. I mean, who does that? I mean, I would question. I was like, what do you? Because you're obviously, if you're doing it, you're making a point, because it's not a natural thing to do. Maybe the peace symbol or something, but so the fact that so many of them do that tells me that there's something going on there, and that they, whether they literally believe this is who they worship because Satan's responsible for their success. Because a lot of them, if you look at their talent level, you wonder. I don't know any other explanation. So,
right. Yes.
But certainly there's something to it, because there's too many hand signals, too much symbolism out there, I think, to be innocent.
Well, I thought it when I read this. I don't know which book I read it in, but like the gradualism, it was like talking about how when TVs came out in Mexico, like the average household had like 5 children or something, like a huge family. And then this show was like the first soap opera or whatever, novellas, I think and they only had 2 kids in it. And
Yeah.
the next, like within 10 to 15 years, every family, it was a huge, so popular show, they only had 2 kids because they like made it seem like you could only give two children the perfect life. Anymore, it was too
Right.
big. Yeah.
That's certainly my generation. I have 2 kids, and probably the people I know, the vast majority of them have 2 kids,
Hmm.
if they have kids.
Right.
And if that's kind of the standard, and I absorbed the propaganda, all of us did,
Right.
and that came in forms of media, and even really more damaging than that is you see things like relationship. I mean, America's, and I've written about our dysfunctional country many times in our dysfunctional world. Of course, it's been exacerbated
Right.
by this COVID narrative, which is dividing. It's happening in my family. It's dividing people up along those lines, where the unvaccinated are becoming the
Yes.
undead, basically. But with this dysfunction is so much driven, and has been driven by decades again of people. You go back to the 1950s. I wrote about this in the Bullyocracy, my book about bullying. I cited some studies and say, I don't think that there was such a thing as this teenage rebellion until the 1950s. I think if you look at the teenagers of the 20s and
Interesting.
30s, but they learned it again from Marlon Brando, the Wild One,
No
probably the first.
way.
Yeah, and Marlon Brando, in that movie, he's just he's a rebel without a cause before they made the film Rebel Without a Cause, and they even ask him at one point, Johnny, what are you rebelling against?
All
And he
right.
goes, what do you got? And that's the message. And
Right.
James Dean, if you watch Rebel Without a Cause, what is going on there? And they're these Natalie Wood, the other teenagers in it. They're just they're recklessly racing cars. They hate their parents irrationally. They don't see it just because I don't. There's
Wow.
no rest. There's no reason. And how has that translated now down the decades? Now, I don't think I know. I went through it with my kids, but when kids hit to be puberty, 12,
Hmm.
13 years old, uh, they change. Now, I don't know that they changed mentally as much as they did in the past, because now you get sudden where and I mean every child suddenly is embarrassed of their parents. They don't want to talk to them. In many
Yeah.
cases, they act like they hate it. I don't know if that was a thing, but they watched all these movies. They read,
Wow.
Catcher in the Rye,
Yeah.
huge book. Catcher
Right.
in the Rye. Everybody down to Mark David Chapman. It was withholding a copy of it. He was, apprehended
All
at
right.
Berlin, and that's a book that invented teenage angst, whatever that is. Because
Yeah.
again, here the hero Holden Caulfield is just pissed off at nothing. He just hates the. I mean, he's a teenager. There's no reason for him to feel the way he does.
That's such a good point.
And so I think that if you look now and you wonder why so many families are dysfunctional, because they've learned. How many television shows have you seen, especially television shows, whether it's going back to Rhoda and her mother, or people like the adult characters in these shows always have a terrible relationship, the adult children with their parents. And it's
Um,
always let's write an episode. Mom's coming to visit, and the adult daughter. Oh my God, my mother's coming to visit. And it's like the worst tragedy in the world, and it's always the same theme. Now, why would that be? Why aren't there any shows talking about how great the family bond is, or
yeah.
generational? They never stress that, and so life imitates art. And I say, if anybody doubts that people absorb these messages, just look how they've responded to this COVID stuff, where they're accepting all this nonsense. It's science. It's the same thing. Most people are susceptible to brainwashing. That's why they use it. And unfortunately, we are where we are now, and that's why nursing homes are so popular. Because you look around the
Right.
world, you look
Yes.
around Asian countries, we're basically all the non-white countries, are the elderly are still pretty much revered,
Hmm.
and they're the elders, and they would never think of putting them in an expensive, incredibly expensive facility where they're going to be mistreated.
Yes.
Everybody acknowledges they get horrible care there, but
Yeah.
Americans and other Western nations, again, white nations for the most part, have opted to do that. And so we treat our elderly like trash here. And again, I think that's reflects poorly on a society, but it's all, I think, learned from all those media productions that stress the same theme. They never stress other, something like the Waltons, back in the 70s. They
Right.
didn't stress the love, the intergenerational love, and how important family is. And it's horrible. It's reprehensible. But again, I don't know anybody else is writing about this, but so
No,
maybe I'm not noticing it.
you're like blown because I'm thinking of so many. Like as a little kid, you do these things because you see them on the TV show. And now I'm thinking it's so many of my like preconceived beliefs because of the shows I watch. But that family thing is so key because everything's dysfunctional. And then so you see that on the TV that everyone's life is in shambles, and then you're in school for 9 hours out of a day where you're away from your family being instructed by some expert that's given power by the state. And now then you come home, it's all kind of like connecting.
Sure, it is, and it is, and it's sort of those schools, of course, were. I mean, again, my book Bullyocracy painted a very bleak picture of our school system, and now that we're seeing it exposed, I mean, these roaches have been. We turn on the lights and they're scurrying for the corners because you can see how awful most of these teachers are. When and they're being, they're showing up on Instagram, they're
Yeah.
showing them how biased they are. That with the one teacher that said, "See that flag?" And she took down the American flag
Right.
and said, "But I have another flag, and it's the LBGT flag."
Right.
These are the people that are teaching our schools. And of course, you see the battles at the school boards with the parents,
Yeah.
who even to the point of a transgender male is just a guy wearing a skirt could
Mhm.
rape a girl. And this is very near me. Loudon County is my neighboring county. I used to work
Mhm.
there. Supposedly great school system, but apparently they were okay with this guy. Now he was finally his day in court. I think he was. I don't know what he was sentenced to, but he was
Yeah.
tried and convicted of something today. But that's the world we live in now, and it's you're right. Kids are, they're spending the majority of every day with these horrible people for the most part. I mean, they're good teachers here and there, but the
Absolutely. Yes.
vast majority of them are disastrous. They're going to be influencing your child. They're going to be injecting their own bias and propaganda into it. And if you're lucky, you get to spend a little bit of time with your kids, but you're competing with that awful school system, and you're competing now with cell phones and whatever they're getting there from their friends in that world, and of course, television, movies, music, and internet. So it's really hard to compete with that because there's no way you're going to be seen as uncool no matter what you do, especially if you try to lay down some
Yeah.
boundaries, and it
Well,
just breeds dysfunction.
even what you just said about the of like hating your parents. So at the time you're out old enough to read and be propagandized, they're sending you your parents are either racist because they, are homophobic or transphobic. And wow, that's just making so much sense. That was a great observation. You're right. I never read anybody reading about gradual. I mean, I've heard like the idea, but not such great examples.
Well, I appreciate that because I mean I do try to, maybe I try too hard, but I try
No.
to observe things. I try to put observations out there that I don't think people find anywhere else. So if people read my blog or Substack, you're gonna find, or my books, you're gonna find stuff there that you may not agree with it. Maybe I'm really off base, but you're gonna say, "Wow, I never heard anybody say that before." And because I look at things differently, I'm not left or right. I'm a populist basically, but
Mhm.
I just have observations, and I think that these things are important, especially in terms of media, because I consume media, I observe it a lot. Lots of the media I like, especially what I like a lot. I love science fiction a lot, and so most of the shows I gravitate to, and the propaganda there is really really heavy, and
Yeah.
they'll throw it in there constantly, and it still sometimes keeps me because they may have a really cool plot or something. But so I try to write about it and say, why is this? Why is that? I mean, I think I was the first one, and lots of people told me that just made the simple observation when I was writing Crimes and Cover-Ups that how come Hollywood never made a movie about George Washington
Yeah.
or Thomas Jefferson or any of the founding fathers?
Right.
They just, I mean, how how does no one question that? And a lot of people told me, yeah, you're right. Or they'll say, well, something, they made a TV movie in the 70s or something. Well, that doesn't really count. I
No,
tell you,
no.
during the golden age of Hollywood, they made plenty of movies about Lincoln. They made lots of movies about royal personages in England. Lots of movies about that, Queen Elizabeth and things like that. And they made a movie about Alexander Hamilton, the only founding father, who, of course, was the
Yeah,
banker's favorite.
right. A
Now he's
possible
a hip.
Rothschild kid.
Yeah, exactly. Now he's a hip black rapper on Broadway, and that's he's the father of debt, and he was he was horrible. He'd be a member of the CFR if he
Yeah.
was around today.
Yeah, absolutely
So,
would.
so it's no accident that he's the only one that gets good press.
No, that's such. I remember reading that in your book, and I was like, that is like why. I think the only movie I can think of is Mel Gibson, but that's not about the, it's
Yeah,
not
and that
really
was
about.
late, and that was like 1999 or something, and he caught hell for that. I mean,
Did
all he
he?
did was movie. Oh, he was criticized. That's when Mel Gibson. That's when he first started getting his really bad press. So
Okay.
then they started saying, okay, the sexiest man alive, whatever they used to call him at some point. Maybe there's something wrong with this guy.
Yeah.
And then then of course then he made the movie about Jesus, and it was all over.
Yeah.
But all that movie was just simply a movie about a family during
Yes.
the war for independence. But they made the British look bad, and that was enough to trigger all these people.
Mm,
So it was, but they liked it, and I talk about this in the book, Crimes and Cover-Ups. The media stays away from that founding of the republic like the plague. Only time they mention it is to call the people they're racist. They make fun of them and
right.
say they're worthless.
Yeah.
They never talk about what they were fighting for. They don't really talk about the events, because then it's easy to invite comparisons to what we see today. Okay, they were fighting tyranny. Okay, exactly what was a tyranny then? T on stamps, T on taxes. They wanted taxation without representation. They didn't want that. They wanted consent to those who govern them. Look at what we've been dealing with now, and what we're dealing with every day. It's a tyranny that's unprecedented. So they don't want to plant any ideas, maybe in some Americans' heads who aren't completely brainwashed, to realize, wow, wait a minute, if they fought for, they revolted then. What are we doing here with double
Yeah.
masking and social distancing?
Right. So I mentioned this in our pre-show a little bit, like ties in. So I read this book, the behind are behind the revolutions, and it was Freemasonry and Zionism, and I think it was written by a French guy. But so he brings up this point that all the revolutions in Europe and in America were done by Freemasons, and that the Freemasons have never. So they put this seed in people's heads that they weren't really free. That under a king, you're not really free. You need to have a constitute or a republic. So they inspire all these people. They overthrow their kingdoms, and then look where this has led us. 200 years later. So his theory is like it's not a bug. It's a feature which will happen, as opposed to it'll be you'd have more protection under a strong church and a divine right of king.
Well, and I'm familiar with that, and there's a lot of that the Freemasonry and the Illuminati, which was a real thing,
Right.
was the idea they wanted to destroy the church, and a lot the monarchies were tied to the church. So I can understand that a little bit, but I think I don't agree with the monarchical form of government. I think that the fact that the British royal family, which is worthless, they don't really have any power. They have tons of money.
Yes.
But they have no power, and yet they're still worshipped even by a lot of idiotic Americans who get all excited when one of them has a baby, or they, whatever stupid, gossipy stuff is going on over there with the American girl, the one that's
Meghan Markle.
yeah, with that kind of nonsense. But
Right.
totally irrelevant stuff, fluff.
Yeah.
But I think that. And you mentioned a little bit about anarchists as well.
Yeah.
I if I had been around at the founding of the republic, I think there's a strong argument to be made that the Articles of Confederation, as they were originally written, were probably even better than what we got, because most of the people I love as historical figures, Jefferson, Patrick Henry, George Mason, I think they were the best of the founding fathers, and they really were not in favor of the Constitution. But that was before George Mason basically, pretty much was the main author of it, wrote the Bill of Rights. So the Constitution, with the Bill of Rights included, that's an important caveat, because without the Bill of Rights, it does give too much power. It doesn't give any protections. But with the rights, I think it's as close to a perfect form of government as man has ever created. Now, the anarchists have an argument that all authority does appear to be corrupt, and so there's no reason to respect it. So I can understand throwing your hands up and saying, what the hell, I'm not obeying any authority. I can understand that. I'm a little sympathetic to it, but I think that if the Constitution was abided by, the separation of powers was its greatest feature before the Bill of Rights came in, and the idea of separating power out, because that populist, what I'm concerned about is I don't want too much power consolidated in anywhere. Doesn't matter where, in any person or any group, any one area. And the Constitution, with the checks and balances of the three branches of government, they were supposed to offset each other and check and balance it out. And it could have worked beautifully. Now, early on, it became corrupted under John Marshall, because the judiciary took off under him and did things they weren't intended to do. And again, the other two branches let him do it. And then with Lincoln, the executive branch is the first imperial presidency. We've had tons of imperial presidencies since.
Right.
Overstepped their bounds in the legislative branch, which is the most responsive to the people. I mean, we can literally overturn, one house every 2 years. We never do. We vote 96% of these clowns in every election.
Right.
You believe, if you believe the polls, it's shameful. There's more turnover in the Politburo. When the Soviet Union was at its height of power, there was a bigger turnover in the Soviet Politburo than there is. People don't realize how hard it is for an incumbent to lose. And I don't know what's sad. I think it's because they're not counting the votes, but it would be even sadder if they really are counting the votes. And the majority of American citizens are that stupid that they're continually returning the Nancy Pelosi's, the Lindsey Grahams, the most awful people in the world. If they just can't stop sending them back, but they're apparently something there where they almost feel like they don't have a right to vote them out or something. I want to shake them and say, you do know you can vote against them, right?
Right.
They just do it. But go ahead. No, I would say, so with the checks and balances, it could work that way, but the legislative branch, which should be closest to, it should be our greatest hope, is actually by far the weakest branch. And again, this goes back to Lincoln as well. The Congress of his day rolled over and played dead when Lincoln trampled all over the Constitution, arrested all those citizens and threw them into prisons. The Congress could have done something about that. They did nothing. And ever since then, the last time the Congress is supposed to declare war, that's supposed to happen. The last time we declared war was in World War II. We've certainly been at war plenty of times since then. So they've abdicated their role. So as it stands now, again, I'm defending a form of government that really isn't operational, because the constitutional form of government hasn't existed for a long time because they don't abide by it.
Yeah. But do you find that interesting? Like, all those founding fathers, or most of them, were Freemasons. They openly admit overthrowing these things. And it makes you wonder, like, you see the one point that I brought up a while ago, but was, so under a elected government, if those resources that they have access to, if it's a forest, they would chop down every tree, sell it so they can get kickbacks in some way, as opposed to a king. If he had this power, he's going to cut down an eighth of the trees because he's interested. He doesn't care about you or the trees, but he wants his wealth to last for generations to come. So it's just like all those things with the resources and like, why try? It's just, maybe I'm so jaded. Like, the good guys in this world haven't won in a long time. So to think that, like, America was the good guys standing up for the right to only lead to this, it makes me think, like, what did we get?
Yeah, it makes you wonder. I've written about that, is what the founding fathers, there would be a weeping you could hear, across the universe if they could understand what had become. The thing that they did risk their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. Right. They did risk that. I write about it in Crimes and Cover-Ups. But I don't know. I'm so anti-war that it's just in me. I think war is Jeanette
Totally.
Rankin, who I wrote about in the book, but it's a really stupid way. It's never a good way to resolve disputes. And it's one of the good things Benjamin Franklin said, which no one remembers, unlike his penny saved is a penny earned and all the Poor Richard stuff. His great quote, timeless quote, is that there's no such thing as a good war or a bad peace. And I wish we'd remember that, because so at the time when the colonists wanted to revolt from Great Britain, if it had meant war, I don't know. I might have said it's not worth it, over
Yeah.
taxes. I might have very well been against it. I don't know. It depends, I guess, where I stood in society. Certainly, if I was in danger of becoming a soldier, I probably would have said, "This is stupid. I'm not
Yeah.
worth it." But that's the only war I would have supported, the War of 1812, because the British did attack us. So it was
Yeah.
the only defensive war we've ever really fought. But other than that, I would have been in opposition to any war. But I think that going past the reasons for it and whether it was justified, the form of government I still think is the greatest form on paper of
Hmm.
government, with the Bill of Rights. Huge caveat with that in there. I think it's the greatest form of government man has ever created. Now, we've never, very seldom, if ever, maybe in the early years of the Republic, lived up to it, and so I
No,
guess it's
I'd
even.
agree with that. Yeah, I think I'd on it. It hypothetically, it would work. You have people that, but the system's just so beyond screwed. Like allowing politicians who are in state workers vote. Their vote counts the same as my vote, even though they're living off of our tax dollars. Like this stuff it makes zero sense. It's totally ridiculous.
Well, I've suggested, some changes that should be made. I think the biggest change, and I've been talking about it for a long time. Everybody likes it when I say it, but I think that the House of Representatives, especially since you can't turn it over for whatever reason, they won't vote these clowns out. I would like to see a lottery system for the House of Representatives, where
Mm,
every 2 years a random group of citizens was picked to represent us, and you would get a real cross section of America that way. So you'd
yeah,
get class and poor people in there, which
right.
you don't have obviously now. You only have the very wealthy, so they would have obviously completely different concerns and priorities than the wealthy people that are in Congress now. So I think that would, and I think probably you should go back in terms of the Senate. I think you should probably go back to the way it was before 1913, where you had the state legislatures pick them, because
Oh,
that's
I didn't
more of
know
a
that.
because direct, the same year they created the federal
Yeah, I
jury.
was just gonna say that's a funny year.
Say funny year, and I think that would help, just because it sounds like because I'm not against democracy. I love the idea of power to the people, but the problem is the mob mentality is so easily swayed. We talked about the
Mm,
propaganda on television. So the population, there's a reason why the founders wanted a constitutional republic. What is it? Benjamin Franklin also said, democracy is two foxes and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. So I think that's
it's a
you
great
know th-
quote.
yeah, and that's what democracy. Unfortunately, you end up with majority rule sometimes, and if the majority of the people are pretty stupid, which I think
I'd
it's pretty
agree.
obvious they are,
Yes.
you know what you're going to get. So you need to be held in check some, but they need to be held in check by power. So I think that's about the best we could do. But
Mm,
certainly the main problem is exposing and getting rid of the corruption at every level of our society, and that's a monumental task. And I think it's a task that's beyond human.
right. Well, I think I talked to you about this last time, but same last question. Where do we go? Like inflation, race relations, and people relations are at all time lows. Maybe even more than the Civil War. You might know that.
Yeah.
I think we're more opposed. But where do you see America going in 5 years?
Well, I certainly didn't see us here 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't, I said when this pandemic thing began that I didn't know what the end game was. And on the surface, it looks like it's just they're going to move hell and high water to get everyone vaccinated. They
Mm,
obviously want us to take this jab, whether it's the mark of the beast. I don't know. I don't know what, but there's a reason they're pushing this so hard.
I agree.
So I don't know at this point, unless there's a real opposition to them, and there is no effective opposition right now. I mean, maybe the police officers and all the other workers that are balking now. Maybe if enough of them, I don't know, maybe they can stop it.
What do you mean? Marjorie Taylor Greene's in there fighting for your right, Don.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's there's a handful of Republicans in Congress that are okay on the issue, but nobody's really up to what I would consider good enough. But that's all you have. But I'm talking about people at all levels of society, more Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s that are standing up and saying we're not. And you're starting to see it with police officers. But the problem is they did a little of that in Victoria, Australia, and that's what I'm scared of. What we're seeing over there. Because that's a tyranny I don't think the world has ever seen what's happening over there. And if we don't watch out, that's where we're headed. And hopefully we have enough opposition to that. But 5 years, I don't know what is the answer, because after the 2020 election, I think it's pretty obvious we can't vote them out.
Right.
I mean, they've made so people talking about Trump running again or whatever. It's like, they didn't change anything. Why? You think it's going to be different? I mean, they made no changes. In fact, they're making it easier for mail-in ballots and all that nonsense. And they're calling it racist to have voter ID and stuff. And the dead will vote in droves. I mean, so I don't have very much optimism 5 years from now. The only hope is that enough, but you're going to have millions and millions of people. And right now, millions of people are irate. They don't want to get vaccinated, but you're going to have every one of them stand up, and it's going to have to be enough that they can't. But they've really planned this out, and you go back. They've talked about this for a long time, kind of thing. And this is something. FDR said nothing in politics happens by accident. If it happened, you can bet it was planned that way. And he was one of the all-time great conspirators, so he should certainly know.
Yes,
this was planned, and I can't begin to tell you. I don't see good things 5 years from now, unfortunately, but I have to hope maybe we can slow it down. But the last 2 years, the boiling frog and the analogy is out the window.
Yeah,
the frog is completely burned to death at this point.
We're dry as hell. We're boiled.
Oh, dry as hell. Yeah. So it's I don't know, man. I try to hold out some. I guess my little bit of hopium I have is the parents at the school boards, because maybe they can affect some change at the lower level. Yeah. And then maybe it can cascade upwards into mayors and cities, and eventually maybe you can get to the point where you can start getting rid of some of this incredible corruption.
Yeah, no, we all have to have a little hopium. So I think that's a good enough any spot to end. So Don, tell everyone what books they need to get and where they can find you and support you and all those things.
Well, I'm easy to find. You search me and find out more than you want to know, probably. But I've my 6th book is coming out on Borrowed Fame. I am not promoting exactly yet because it's not out there online yet, but it will be any day. So search for it, or just search for my books. My latest before that was Bullocracy, Crimes and Cover-Ups in American Politics, 1776, 1963, forward by the great Ron Paul. Very honored by that. The paperback of that is out now, brand new out there. You want to support me, it has some new material, and that may be the answer whether we get Hidden Mystery 3. DonaldJeffries.news, DonaldJeffries.media, you can find me. I have 2 talk shows. The Donald Jeffries shows airs every Wednesday on Otelli.com. I Protest airs every Friday on TFR, and I'm also on America Unplugged on Saturday over on Rockfin. So I'm also on Jeff Rent's every Monday night. Jeff Rent's a huge network, so you can hear me a lot of places. If you search for me, you'll find lots of interviews and lots of books and lots of.
Awesome. Well, everyone listening, go buy Don's books. Like I can't compliment him enough. I got it as a Christmas present, and I was so excited waiting for it to read, because it was a gift from my parents. But thanks so much, Don, for being on the show. I really appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, Don. Take care. Bye.